Hi, in this session we will understand about what is the invoice matching policy and application of the same in Microsoft Dynamics X 2012. Invoice matching is the process of matching the purchase order information, product receipt information, and vendor invoice information. Vendor invoices are often based on the packing slips that represent actual shipments rather than on purchase orders. Sometimes the invoice amounts do not match the purchase order amounts, and sometimes the shipped quantities do not match the invoice quantities. To manage this information, we can use the various invoice matching policies in Microsoft Dynamics X 2012. We can either match the price or price and quantity both. Price can be matched between the purchase order document and vendor invoice document, while quantity can be matched between the product receipt document and vendor invoice document. Let us understand with an example. For example, we enter a purchase order with one line item for 1000 pieces of bicycles at a price of $1 each. The purchase order is approved and submitted to the vendor. The vendor ships 1000 pieces of bicycle and we receive them in a system by updating the product receipt at the price of $1 each. The inventory cost for the bicycle is updated with this price. An invoice arrives for 1000 pieces of bicycle at a price of $1.10 each. Our company policy allows a 5% net unit price tolerance for this category of item. With the allowed tolerance, a price of $1.05 would be acceptable, but price of $1.10 will not be accepted by the system. When we enter the invoice information, a price matching discrepancy is identified and matching variance icon will be shown. Differences among these documents are called matching discrepancies. Matching discrepancies are compared with the tolerances that are specified. If a matching discrepancy exceeds the tolerance percentage or amount, match variance icons are displayed in the vendor invoice form and in the invoice matching details form. Let us review about which additional information can be matched as a part of the invoice validation process other than the unit price and quantity. In Microsoft Dynamics X 2012, we can match the total amounts on the invoice to the total amounts on the purchase order. This type of invoice matching includes the least amount of detail, so we can use this option to set up control that minimize the staff time that is required to review the invoice matching information. We learned in the previous slide about how unit price and quantities are matched. We will review the options later in this presentation, using which we can decide whether to match price only or price and quantity both. In addition to total invoice value and price and quantity information of the item, we can also match the charges information amounts on the invoice to the charges information amounts on the purchase order. Let us review once again what can be compared between the purchase order document, invoice document, and product receipt document. Summarizing, invoice total value, unit price of item, and charges are compared between the purchase order and vendor invoice document, whereas quantity is compared and matched between the product receipt document and vendor invoice document. Let us understand about what is a two-way and three-way price and quantity invoice matching policy. With matching policy set as a two-way matching, system will match the unit price and invoice line total on the invoice to the unit price and line total on the purchase order line. And with the three-way matching policy, in addition to the validation done by the two-way matching policy, system will also match the quantity information on the invoice to the quantity information on the product receipt that are selected for the invoice. Notice that two-way matching and three-way matching always match the price information by the unit price and net unit price, but we can also configure these matching policies to match the price information by the price total. There are three types of prices are used for comparison. In addition to the unit price, system will match the net unit price for each line on the invoice with the corresponding net unit price on the purchase order. The net unit price is determined by the dividing the net amount of the line by the quantity of the line. And line price total will be matched by comparing the net amount for each line on the invoice with the corresponding net amount on the purchase order line. The net amount is determined by the formula where unit price is multiplied by the line quantity and line charges, if any, will be added and line discount, if any, will be subtracted from this. Let us understand the various invoice validation parameters. In order to locate the invoice matching parameters, go to accounts payable. Under the setup, click on accounts payable parameters. Switch to invoice validation tab. So on this form we can set up the invoice matching related parameters. Let us review them one by one. So first of all, in order to enable the invoice matching process, click on the checkbox invoice matching validation. This will enable the invoice matching validation for the current legal entity. Notice that all these parameters are at the organization level. that means are applicable to all vendors and items. Once we enable the invoice matching validation, as a next step we need to select when there is a discrepancies with the invoice. We want allow to user post invoice just with the warning, or he needs an approval from higher authority. For now we leave it require approval. Here we have three different field groups. Let us review them one by one. First is the invoice total matching. We can enable the invoice total match functionality by clicking this checkbox. Then as a next step we can ask system about when to show discrepancies between invoice totals. So here we have two options. Show the discrepancies only when the discrepancies are greater than the tolerance allowed, and second option says that show discrepancy if it is lesser than the tolerance limit allowed or higher than the tolerance limit allowed. So for now we leave it as greater than the tolerance, and here we can set the invoice total tolerance percentage. We allow the 10% of tolerance while matching the invoice total. Then here we have a price and quantity matching field group. Under this we have a settings related to unit price and totals for a particular purchase order line or invoice line. Here we have a settings which will control whether only price be matched or price and quantity both. In addition, we can also configure the matching details for the price total, that is the price total of an individual purchase line or an invoice line, which will be matched against. So let us review them one by one. So first of all, we need to set the line matching policy. Here we have three options. If not required, then no matching will be done. If two-way matching, then as we learned, price on the unit price on the purchase order will be compared with the unit price on the invoice. With three-way matching, unit price on the purchase order and quantity from the product receipt will be compared with the vendor invoice. So for now we select the two-way matching. Then we can also override this matching policy on the purchase order, and here we have a settings which will determine whether we can override or not. We have two options for allow matching policy override field. If it is set to higher than company policy, that means that two-way matching cannot be set to not required. It can be only set to three-way matching on a purchase order. If lower or higher than company policy is selected, that means three-way matching set to two-way matching set to three-way matching, and also they can be set to not required option. So not required is at the lowest level, then two-way matching, and then three-way matching. For the field display unit price match icon, we can select when to display the match variance icon. So here we have a two option again. Show the match icon only when the variance tolerance is greater than the allowed tolerance, or show the discrepancy when variance tolerance are greater or less than the allowed tolerance. However, for the unit price, we don't specify the tolerance in this form. For that we have a special form called price tolerance form, and there we specify the unit price tolerance for a vendor item combination that we will review later. And here we can enable whether we want to match the price total for an individual line or not. So we have if it is none, then line totals will not be matched. And here we have three options: whether we want to specify tolerance in percentage or amount or in both. So if we enable percentage, then we can specify the percentage here. If we select amount, then here we can specify the amount, and if we select both will be used to verify. So let's say if I give 50 here and 10 here, that means variance tolerance for the line total should not exceed the 50%, and difference of the amount should not exceed more than 10. This is a fixed absolute value, but for now we just skip the percentage and we set the percentage as 20. So line total should not exceed the 20% of variance. And display price total match icon, again here we have two choice: if greater than tolerance, greater than or less than tolerance. So we say greater than tolerance. And finally we have a third field group, that is a charge matching. If we have any miscellaneous charge on the purchase order line or a purchase order, that will be matched only if match charge is checked. And here we can specify when to display charge match icon: if greater than tolerance or greater than or less than tolerance. We say greater than tolerance, and we allow 50% of miscellaneous charge variance. So on this form we can set up the invoice validation parameters for invoice total matchings, price and quantity matchings, and miscellaneous charges matching. Let us review the product demonstration about how to set up the price tolerance for vendor item combinations. Notice that this form is only available if Enable Invoice Matching Validation field on the Accounts Payable Parameters form is selected. If you look at the invoice validation parameters, we can set the tolerance percentage for the invoice totals, as well as we can set the tolerance percentage for the price totals. In addition, we can also set up the charges tolerance. But for the unit price, we have a special form using which we can set up the price tolerance for the item vendor combinations. Price tolerance can be set up under the accounts payable. Under the setup, under the invoice matching menu, we have a price tolerance menu. Here we can set up the price tolerance for the item vendor combinations. In order to create a new record, click on new, and here we can select whether we want to set up price tolerance for an individual item, for a group of item, or for all items. Similarly, here we can set up whether we want to set it up for an individual vendor, group of vendor, or all vendors. We have set up the 2% as a price tolerance for the bicycle product, but for all vendors. This means that price match variance icon will be shown for the unit price when unit price exceeds more than the 2%. Price tolerance form can also be accessed from the release product form by clicking on purchase action menu, and then under the invoice matching group, click on price tolerance. This can be also accessed from the all vendors form. From the invoice action menu, click on price tolerance under the setup group. We learned that price tolerance percentage can be set up for our company items and vendors. When vendor invoices are compared with purchase order information, Microsoft Dynamics X searches for the applicable price tolerance percentage in the order as shown in this table. So system will first try to look at the records which are set up for individual item, then for a group of item, and then for all items. Let us review the product demonstration for the invoice matching process. Hi. In order to understand the difference between two-way invoice matching policy and three-way invoice matching policy, we have created a two purchase order line. First purchase order line has a two-way matching policy, and second order purchase line has a three-way matching policy. To simplify the calculation, we have kept the same quantity and same price for both of these purchase order line. And 5 pieces of bicycle have been product receipt updated for both of these purchase order line. So with two-way invoice matching policy, system will only compare the unit price, and with three-way matching policy for the second order purchase line, system will compare the unit price as well as the quantity which has been updated against the product receipt. So let's try to validate that. In order to validate, click on invoice. For now, everything seems to be okay. For the first purchase order line, it's a two-way matching policy. So even if we change the quantity from 5 to 6, we have updated the product receipt for 5, but we are trying to invoice update for 6. We don't see the matching icon here. But for the second purchase order line, if we try to change the quantity which is more than the product receipt quantity, as soon as we save the line, we see the matching variance. This is because three-way matching will also match the quantity what we are going to invoice update against the what has been product receipt updated. So we see the matching variance icon. And on the price tolerance form, we have specified the price tolerance of 2% for the bicycle product for all vendor. That means if price tolerance exceeds the 2%, price variance icon will be shown for the unit price. So if we try to increase this unit price from 1 to 1.02, that is within the 2%, then we don't see the price variance icon here. But if we try to make it 1.03, that will exceed the allowable tolerance, and we see the variance icon. We can see the additional matching details by clicking on invoice line and then click on matching details. And here we see all the details which has been included for the matching. So we see the variance for the unit price because which exceeds the 2% of tolerance, and ultimately net amount is exceeding the tolerance of 6.18. Here we see the tolerance for the unit price because it exceeds the 2%. Here on the top of the form we see the matching errors. So for the first packing slip, it shows that unit price matching error exists. We move to the second product receipt line, and here we see the quantity matching errors exist. For the second purchase order line, matching policy is set to three-way matching. So quantity and price both will be matched, and if variance exists for both of them, variance icon will be shown. If we try to modify the price which exceeds the 2%, let's say 1.04, then matching a variance icon will be shown immediately. So we have a matching variance for price as well as for quantity for the second purchase order line. However, for the first purchase order line, system will not show the matching variance icon for the quantity because it's a two-way matching. We hope that now difference between the two-way matching and three-way matching policy is clear. We can use invoice totals matching to help make sure that total invoice amounts do not deviate from expected amounts by more than an acceptable variance. 6 totals are compared in the invoice totals matching form as shown in the table, and those are balance, that is subtotal, total discount, charges, sales tax, round off, and invoice amount. Let us say allowable tolerance for invoice totals matching is 10%, then 100% variance for the total discount amount and 25% for the charges is considered as a matching discrepancy. If one of these total has a matching discrepancy, the matching variance icon will be shown for the invoice total. On the accounts payable parameter under the invoice validation tab, under the invoice total matching, here we have a setting selected to match invoice totals. So we have set up the system so that invoice total will be matched during the invoice updating the purchase order, and we have a allowed tolerance of 10%, and the variance icon will only be shown if variance percentage exceeding the 10%. Let us review the product demonstration about how to set up the charge tolerance. On the accounts payable parameter under the invoice validation tab, here we can specify the settings related to charges matching. Charges tolerance percentage specified here is applicable to current legal entity. However, if we want to override it for a specific charge code, we can override it by navigating through accounts payable under the setup. Under the invoice matching menu, click on charges tolerance. Here we can override the default charge tolerance percentage for a specific charge code. Select the charge code for which you want to override. Let's say packaging. And for a packaging code, we set it to 20%. So whenever there is a packaging charge on the purchase order line, 20% of tolerance will be used instead of the default tolerance of 50%. So let us review how the charges can be compared. Here we have a purchase order line for one piece of bicycle with 1 unit price, and we can specify the miscellaneous charges by clicking on financial maintenance charge. Here we have added a €1 of fixed miscellaneous charge for the packaging, and notice that charges code will only be used for invoice matching if compare purchase order and invoice line checkbox is checked for a particular charge code. Otherwise they will not be considered for invoice matching. So with this, let us try to confirm the purchase order, and then we can try to invoice update the invoice, and then we try to post the invoice for this purchase order. So here we have a purchase line for one piece of bicycle, and if we go to little right, here we have no variance for price match, and also price total is okay. And as a next step, we go to invoice line and matching details, and here we have a compared charges. Open up the compare charges form. So here we can see the comparison. We have a actual total calculated value is 1, expected value is 1, variance percentage is 0, and allowed tolerance percentage is 20. If we would have not override the tolerance percentage for a packaging code, default tolerance of 50% would be applicable here. Now let us try to specify the charge value here. So let's say 20% of tolerance is allowed. So we go to the financial and maintain charge, and we enter 1.2 as a charge that is still within the tolerance limit. Close, and we go to the invoice matching details form again. We can see that now variance amount is 0.2 and variance percentage is 20, and tolerance percentage is also 20. So that's the reason we still see the check mark here and not the matching variance icon. If we have a multiple charges code here, all will be displayed here, and we can see the comparison details on this form. However, we see the variance for the invoice total. The reason is that 10% of invoice total variance is allowed, and for, as we understood, there are 6 totals which will be matched, and for charges the variance is exceeding 10% and that is 20. So for charges the match variance icon is shown, but for when we compare the charges individually, it is within the tolerance. And then let us try to give a value which is exceeding the 20%. So we make it 1.3 and we go to the invoice matching details again, and as we can see now variance icon is being shown because tolerance percentage is variance percentage is exceeding the allowed tolerance of 20%. So this is how we can compare the charges during invoice posting of purchase order. Thank you for watching this video.